The leadership of the YAGA Africa is suing for legislative backing for electronic transmission of elections results in the country. The election observing body says its observations showed that inconsistencies marred the officially announced results of the just concluded Edo governorship election. INEC on Sunday night announced and declared Senator Monday Okpebholo of the APC as the winner of the election. According to the electoral umpire, Senator Okpebholo polled a total of 291,667 votes to defeat his closest rivals, Dr. Aswa Ighodalo of the PDP, who polled 247,566 votes, and Olumide Akpata of the Labour Party, who got 22,763 votes. Speaking on a national TV on the outcome of the election, the executive director of the YAGA Africa, Samson Itodo, says that the body under his leadership deployed a unique methodology to monitor the election.
In this election, YAGA Africa deployed its process and results verification for transparency methodology, the PRVT. And what the methodology does is we look at a random sample of polling units, deploy stationary observers who stay at the polling units, from the commencement to the end of the process. And because we deploy to a statistically representative sample of polling units, we are able to release what we call estimates, the watching the votes estimates for the vote share that each candidate is supposed to get. This election is the 17th governorship election that we've deployed this methodology. Right. And we've also deployed it for 2 presidential elections in 2019 and in 2023, and they were all deployed successfully.
He disclosed that the process was transparent at the polling unit level, beginning from accreditation, voting down to collation of results. He alleged that sharp practices and manipulation came into play at the local government level.
What happened in the Edo election, for instance, we get results from the polling units, those sampled polling units. And because we apply statistical principles and technology, we are able to provide information that represents what happens in other polling units. For this election, the process of accreditation, voting, and recording of results at the polling unit complied substantially with the procedure. In other words, those processes were seamless and they were transparent. The challenge with this election was that when the results came to the collation center, in those 4 local governments that we highlighted, those results were manipulated, they were altered, and so some of the vote shares fell outside the margin. And this was actually across board. So the real issue with the election is the collation process. Right. And so results were altered. So a classic example, if you look at Oroedo, for instance, there was a 10% increase in the results that was announced for the party that won Oroedo. And those results, based on our analysis, clearly shows that they were deducted, from one of the parties and then added. So there were a lot of deductions and additions at the collation level. But at the polling unit level, the results and the votes that were recorded, they were recorded correctly. It was when it came to the polling unit. The second point was in places like Ikpoba, where the collation was disrupted. The guidelines is very clear that the stages of collation, from ward to local government and then to state. But what happened was that in Ikpoba, the collation was not done at the local government level, even though there was no provocation, because we had, in all the 18 local governments, we had local government collation observers who were there to observe this process. And you clearly see that there was a lack of transparency. And that is why those inconsistencies were spotted, because the beauty of the PRVT methodology is if in the course of the entire results management value chain, any results have been altered, the PVT is able to detect it because we rely on the granular results that comes from the polling unit.
To the suit for legislative backing for recognition of the IRF portal and electronic transmission of results as part of the Electoral Act. This, he believes, will check reoccurrence of manipulation.
This election has reinforced the fact that we need electronic transmission of results, because the results that were on INEC IRF portal, and you had to commend INEC, because those results, as at 6 p.m., on election day, about 90% of results were already on the portal, right? But the legality of those results on the portal, is not guaranteed, because of the decision of the Supreme Court that the IREV is not part of the collation system.
So is this why the Electoral Act needs to come in?
Even if you have mutilations, yes, even if you have mutilations, those results on the portal, don't have any legal effect based on the interpretation and the decision of the Supreme Court.
They're not actionable at all.
At all. This is why, because it's not part of the collation system. So what needs to be done is that the National Assembly, needs to amend the law to integrate electronic transmission into our electoral process and make it compulsory. The second thing that needs to be done is that INEC needs to thoroughly investigate, and it owes it to Nigerians, what were the reasons for those inconsistencies in places like Ego, places like Oredo and Ikpobaoka. And I must say that it's not just the APC. The three major parties altered, results, and they were all beneficiaries of all this mutilation.
He says, as an impartial election observer, YAGA Africa will continually monitor elections to unravel grey areas for the umpire to right its wrongs in subsequent polls towards achieving transparency and fairness. Jude Aweke, reporting for VOS TV News, Benin.